What's up, everybody? I'm Billy Ryan, and you are listening to the No One Is Watching podcast, where we explore leadership, culture, and the impact they have on high-performing teams. We can all admire the championships that are won on the field and the big profits that show up on the balance sheet. But this show is dedicated to the premise that those battles are won long before they start. Through conversations with elite performers and leaders in the world of business, sports, and life in general, we'll learn valuable lessons on how you can optimize yourself and your organization. Today, I'm joined by former Davidson College head men's basketball coach and current leader in residence, Bob McKillop. We talk about Bob's 33 years at the helm of Davidson Basketball, what it's like watching his son be a successor, the culture he shaped, and what makes his most famous former player, four-time NBA champion and two-time MVP Stephen Curry, so special. Coach, appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, delighted to be with you, Billy. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to chatting. That was first and foremost. I feel like we got to start with that tournament. That was maybe the maddest March I can remember in a while. What were your thoughts on that?
You know, I think there's a lot of factors that entered into it. The age of the rosters, the transition of rosters from new players to veteran players, the matchups that were occurring, styles of play. The confidence that developed as a game progressed. You could see, for instance, Fairleigh Dickinson and Purdue, that Fairleigh Dickinson had a game plan that just built their confidence and eroded the confidence of Purdue. So I believe that there are numerous factors that played into the madness of what March Madness was.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've seen that a lot throughout really college athletics the last couple of years, sort of the aftermath of COVID and sort of what that's done to eligibility and rosters and things like that. And I think we'll probably be seeing it for a couple more seasons, honestly, with some of those maturity, those kids that are maturing probably a little bit more than we've seen in the past just because of, the changing landscape.
What's
it been like for you?
That COVID year was a pivotal year for so many in terms of getting that extra year. So you're seeing rosters with 23, 24, even 25-year-old players. And when you have an incoming freshman that's 18, maybe 19, and they're going against a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, 25-year-old man, there's a dramatic difference between the physical maturity and the emotional maturity. And you can understand why there can be such chaos with the way things play out.
Yeah. So what's it been like for you, not on the sideline every game? What's it been like you watching from the stands or wherever you're watching the games from these days?
I have many opportunities to, so to speak, get into a locker room and inspire and energize, as I did when I coached. But now I'm doing it as a corporate speaker, a civic speaker, a class presenter, an event participant. So I get to deliver a message, but I don't get to see it play out because once that event ends, it's the last I see of who's ever participating in that event. Whereas in the locker room, you go out on the court and you see it in action, you tape it, you correct it, you individually work at it. So I miss that building process, and I miss the relationship with players. Of course, all of the guys on this year's team were guys I recruited. So watching them and seeing them is enjoyable for me. But the anxiety I feel as the father of the head coach is rather extraordinary.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, that's got to be a little bit of a surreal feeling, you sitting in that chair for over 30 years, and then the next guy to sit in it is your son.
If anyone was well prepared for it, it's he, because he grew up dreaming about being a Davidson player. He lived that dream as a very successful Davidson player, was a long-time assistant coach and a great student of the game, and now he's roaming the sidelines as the head of his own program. When you sit in the stands and watch your son, you feel the anxiety, you know the feelings of what it's like to be the father, but you also know the feelings about what it's like to be a coach. And then, of course, when you're on the sideline, you could expend your energy by moving up and down the sideline, kneeling down, standing up, sitting down, patting a player on the back, giving verbal instructions, challenging a referee's call, getting excited about a play. You have to sit there kind of very mild mannered as you're in the stands because you just don't want to give off a reaction that could be perceived in a world today as being dissatisfaction or overjoy or whatever it might be.
You ever slam on that emergency brake like driver's ed when you're in the passenger seat and you see him doing something and that coach instinct takes over?
I've had the fortune of watching the games with Matt's children, so the grandchildren are very nearby and they're young enough that they could sit in my lap. So at those
Oh,
moments,
that's
that
awesome.
grandchild gets a little bit more of a squeeze than and it's a fascinating dynamic.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I wanted to actually ask you about your son and like the that line when he was growing up in Davidson, obviously around the program, and sort of maybe one or two things that you wanted to impart on him as a father, first and foremost. Maybe as a young athlete, as he starts taking sports or basketball specifically a little bit more seriously, and then did that change at all once he attends Davidson and he's playing for you?
Coaching your own child is an extraordinary experience. The joys and the sorrows, the wins and the losses, the happiness and the sadness. You share both ends of the spectrum to the utmost level. I don't know that you can do that on as consistent a basis as you do as a coach with the number of competitions that occur and the preparation that leads up to that competition. So I would never trade it. It is one of the treasures of my life to have had the opportunity to coach both Matt and Brendan. And in that process, I believe that I learned perhaps more than maybe they learned because I learned what it's like to be a father and a coach. I learned what it's like uh, to be in the position of a son with the expectations that the father has, with a player with the expectations that the coach has, and try to marry that in a way that it is helpful for him, but also productive for the team. Both Matt and Brendan came here wearing Davidson on their heart. They were great in the locker room, sensational. Their work ethic was extraordinary. Um, and I was not a guy that trusted myself and my instincts as much as I should have. So I would never praise them in front of the team because I lacked that trust, thinking that if I praised them in front of the team, the players would say, "Oh, you're just saying that because he's your son." And only when I understood that dynamic did I become a more productive and better coach for the boys. A similar capacity occurred in which I learned that everyone is somebody's son. Every guy on the roster is somebody's son. And I can recall a very vivid memory from Matt's freshman year when he and his roommate were arguably the best shooters on the team, and his roommate was Brendan Winters. And it was a game against VMI in Lexington, Virginia. There's 4 seconds to go. We have a baseline inbounds play, timeout. We're down by 1 point, and we come to the bench. And my immediate thought is, I can't call this play from Matt because if he misses that shot, he'll feel miserable and I'll feel miserable. So prior to going into the huddle, I say, I'm going to call this play for Brendan Winters. And as I knelt down in front of the team to diagram it on the whiteboard, I look up above the huddle, and 3 rows up in the stands is Brian Winters, the father of Brendan Winters. And I had this triggered moment that everybody is somebody's son. And if I called it for Brendan and Brendan missed, well, he'd feel horrible and his father would feel horrible. So I had a great learning experience in that particular scenario. And I wound up calling a play for Matt. Matt missed a shot. Yes, I felt awful. He felt awful. We lost, but I learned a much more valuable lesson.
Sure. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's a pretty small percentage of coaches, certainly at that level of athletics, get that opportunity to coach multiple sons, right?
Yeah,
But that being able to separate that in the moment and having that sort of triggering moment had to be pretty eye opening. I mean, my kids are little, and it's, I'm coaching my kid in t-ball right now, and it's like, on a much smaller scale, trying to just get him to engage and do things, and just trying to make sure he's having fun at this point. But doing it when you're competing at that level, and the father instinct takes over, right? You want to protect your kid. That's natural. But then the coach of like, hey, you can't, if you don't take the shot, you're never going to make the shot, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the role you're in now. It's leader in residence across the entire college, right? The Davidson College at large.
It's a marvelous opportunity to engage a variety of constituencies. So uh, I, I'll share some of the things that I've done. I've taught a class on 2 or 3 occasions. I've met with individual students who have asked for direction as to how they can pursue a career after they graduate, how they can navigate the responsibilities they have as a student and still be someone who enjoys college life. I met with the captains of the volleyball team, and they had a magnificent year, and they asked me to share with them some ideas about leadership as they lead their team through the spring and the summer in preparation for their senior year. I met with the field hockey coach and discussed with her the uh, possibility of them taking a trip abroad during the summer, which we did for so many years with our basketball program, and gave her some insight as to how best to make it productive. I have given motivational speeches to the volleyball team. I just got an email 2, 3 days ago from a group of students who are doing a math project, and it's a and uh, uh, statistic course in which they're analyzing certain statistics in basketball, and they've asked me if I could sit down with them and give them some counsel about that. I've addressed I've addressed retreats of various staffs here on the campus. The Herd Hub, which is the outstanding entrepreneurial center of campus, asked me to meet with them and discuss leadership with their core team. Technology and innovation staff asked me to address a retreat and speak with them. I've attended multiple alumni events where I've been on a forum with Doug Hicks, our president, discussing Davidson athletics, the future of Davidson. And I appear at alumni events and various campus occasions, and I throw in some civic and some corporate and even some church organizations as I am able to use that role in so many different capacities.
So they're not exactly putting you out to pasture; they're putting you to work.
But the joy is I can choose my schedule. It's not a full time position; it's part time. So I have a great opportunity to just engage whenever I want to engage and have the time.
What's your perspective on that transition? Because I've experienced it to some extent myself. When you're in it every day in the sports world, there's all these things you take for granted. That's just sort of the table stakes for any sort of athlete or coach or executive or what have you, the environment that you're in. And I have realized, or maybe reminded myself, how applicable all those lessons are, all those values are to the world at large, business, academics, what have you, just the community at large. And I'm curious, has it hit you a little different? Not on the sideline leading a small group of players every day, but leading a more diverse and contributing to a more diverse sort of ecosystem?
Your measurements are certainly different. There's a scoreboard when you're on the sideline. There's not a scoreboard with what I'm doing right now. But it's fascinating how you, as a baseball player, me as a basketball player and coach, can transition the world of sport into the world that we live in. Sports are life. The lessons you learn on the baseball diamond or on the basketball court or on the soccer pitch or on the golf course are the same lessons you learn in life. What makes you a success in that endeavor is going to make you a success in life. So I've tried to carry forward some of those uh, values, some of those sayings, some of those disciplines that are part of coaching and playing into this new life as a leader in residence and into this new chapter of my own personal life. So, decisions as to what I do, when I do it, critical. Being detailed about it. You can't neglect the details, but the invitation is to neglect those details and take shortcuts because you're not under the microscope and you're not being measured like you were as a coach. And then the third thing is discipline. It's freedom is so available, but discipline comes before freedom. And that's one of the pivotal moments of our teaching in basketball here that, yeah, everyone wants freedom, everyone wants their rights, but there's a certain amount of discipline that first must come if you want to navigate that world of rights and feelings and freedom.
Yeah, yeah, the discipline word resonates because it's something that's one of those values I took for granted. Where I don't know, not every single athlete has it, but a majority of them do to some degree, and that's something that you realize maybe isn't as common as it is in sort of the athletic world. And so that is something that, as former athletes or what have you, when you make those transitions, you can lean in on that. I've told people that as well. Just lean in on some of the things that you did as an athlete off the field or off the court that allowed you to be successful. It's got nothing to do with shooting free throws or playing defense. It's got to do with sort of the behind the scenes stuff that worked on. That applies to business, life, anything in general. So I'm sure you're sharing a whole lot of wisdom with some pretty eager kids right now.
And I'm taking them into the locker room, figuratively as we discuss it and kind of give them some insight that this is really what happens on a court in the locker room. And I find it fascinating when I get some feedback. They say, Coach, I listen to you tell me about leadership and details and freedom and discipline, and I watch the basketball game and I see that same thing unfold during a basketball game. So it's an affirmation and validation for me.
Yeah, that's what you love. That's what I love about sports. It's very linear. It's very tangible. You put in the work, you compete at night, and you're going to win or you're going to lose. And then you know how you did that day, and you get to go, get after it again the next day. So a big hallmark of your time, sort of the rallying cry for your team is that TCC slogan. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
TCC stands for the three words: trust, commitment, and care. I was at the deepest point of despair in my life as a coach in 1992. In the spring of '92, we had three miserable seasons here. My first 3 years at Davidson, and we had miserable seasons not because we had a poor roster. We had it because me, as the leader, was infected with the disease of me. It was all about me those first 3 years. I was going to work really hard. I was going to be really confident. But I wasn't really, I liked my guys, but I didn't show I liked them. So I was all about climbing the corporate ladder and moving myself forward rather than taking care of what was in front of me, which was the team. And brought to my knees, I was reading a book that spring of '92, and there were three words that jumped out in one paragraph in that book. The book was a championship season, Notre Dame's 1988 national championship in football, written by Lou Holtz. And when that season began, Holtz asked his players, "Can you be trusted to do your best? Are you willing to commit to do your best? And will you show that you care about each other and do it every day?" And if you could answer these three questions in the affirmative, trust, commit, and care will be a success. And that's the only time it's mentioned in the book, but boy, it really hit home with me. And I came back and made that the foundation of what we did as a program. But the great learning experience for me was that in order for me to implement that as the foundation, as the code of honor for our basketball program, I had to live it myself. So I had to turn that trust, that confidence into humility, not arrogance. I had to commit, and I couldn't be consumed because if I committed so much and was consumed, I would just move forward and not see what's in front of me as well as on the side of me and just neglect everyone else, but committed to be uh, the coach of the New York Knicks rather than committed to be the coach of Davidson College. And in the care, as I said, I really like my guys, but I never showed it. It's one thing to like them, but then it's another thing to show it. So I learned those three incredibly valuable lessons. That has been the code of honor for our basketball team since the 92-93 season. And we've structured a lot of things upon it. And it's been a great base and a great foundation for which we've built this program here.
Yeah, the infected with the disease of me. I love that. That's the more folks I talk to, the more people in leadership from any walk of life, you realize that the one common thread that they all have is they've built up some scar tissue and they have some humility, whether they sought it out or it sought them out. And, for you to sort of have that awakening as a leader and embrace it and say, I'm just, take ownership of that, right? It's not me. It's not the player's fault. It's my fault as the leader that we're not performing, and sort of have that paradigm shift.
Well, I had a great phrase that I would use all the time. Their faults are my failures. And you think about that as a parent when your child does something wrong. I told you so. I told you not to do it. Or you're in the locker room and we lost the game, or it's halftime and we're not playing very well. Didn't you guys remember we talked about this? Well, their faults are my failures.
So you're the leader in residence. You're a mentor to a whole lot of people right now. Who were some of your mentors when you were coming up? Player, coach, young person?
I I don't know. I never really embraced that concept of mentor. What I always embraced was more student. So I would watch, I would study and analyze and think. And I was fortunate to grow up in the 50s and the 60s when there were so many great coaches. So a guy like Red Auerbach, a guy like Red Holzman, two NBA coaches, Celtics and Knicks, John Wooden, Dean Smith, Casey Stengel. You can go down the list of people who I've studied, Lou Holtz, Newt Rockne, uh, Vince Lombardi, and maybe in aftermath, maybe not the name to bring up, but Joe Paterno. Uh, I looked at these guys and saw what they were and how they led. And then I became a student of history as well. I was a history major and I taught history. Uh, so during times of crisis, I would always look at who were the leaders during these times of crisis. Who was the leader during, Churchill? Who was the leader of whatever point in history we're studying that got people through those points of history to a point of success, who led them through these times of adversity. So I would think there's such a long list of people who I studied and um, stole much of my beliefs from.
So you mentioned Dean Smith. You were recently honored with the Dean Smith Award. That had to be pretty special for you.
Especially because I had such a great respect for Dean Smith, spent time with him, never actually coached against him, but um, when I was a high school coach in New York, he was a consistent visitor to the high school, trying to recruit the players I had. I did some clinics with him. Uh, Knowing who he was as a coach, and even perhaps more importantly, what he was as a man, uh, makes this award so much more gratifying to me because of the great respect that I have for Dean Smith and what he accomplished. And I remember one of the things that I always marveled at was how his players would continue to come back to Chapel Hill after graduation. And they'd gather at his camp, they'd come and play pickup, they'd go visit. Uh, Coach Smith would go to some of their games if they were at the NBA level. I marveled at the fact that this was not just a 4-year commitment in a relationship, This was a lifelong commitment of a relationship. And I use that as a model for myself, saying that I don't want these guys to just be around here for 4 years and then, geez, cold turkey, new roster. It's a lifelong relationship. And I feel that the reason we've established that here at Davidson is because the example that Dean Smith set.
So, yeah, you guys have done an amazing job. Davidson's a unique place for a variety of reasons, and I imagine there were a lot of challenges earlier in your career, competitively in that landscape, and sort of seeing, with basketball sort of leading the way, but a lot of the athletic programs really over the last half dozen years or whatever, the last decade, the profile's really been raised. Obviously the profile of the athletic program at large and the college was raised by, your most famous former player, Steph Curry. So, he put us on the map in some ways that probably nobody else could have. And I remember watching the tournament, the Elite Eight run, and obviously being impressed by him and viewing it through sort of the pro sports lens. What's this kid going to turn into as a professional? And, he didn't have the physicality. He had incredible body control. He had incredible intelligence out there. Could obviously shoot the lights out. And I certainly didn't see him turn it into the player that he did. But there's a pretty famous story. He wasn't heavily recruited out of high school. What was it about him that made you say, come play here?
He had a judgment about him that he was very skinny, very weak, very frail, diminutive, baby-faced, that he could not compete at the Power 5 level, that it was too physical of a game. Yes, everyone judged his ability to shoot the basketball, but could he get that off when he's against a longer, more athletic, powerful athlete?
Right.
We loved his skill level. That was not a difficult judgment to make. But perhaps more important than the athletic question was the character issue. We could not have been more impressed or overwhelmed by the complete package of character traits and virtues that he possessed. He had the remarkable capacity to go from play to play without being affected by the previous action. He lived in the present tense, but he had unbelievable ability to not just live in the present moment, but to be one step ahead for the next moment. His awareness, his focus, and I liken it to the great quarterbacks. The quarterback who can stand in the pocket and check off his first, second, third options in a route, that's the quarterback whose time slows down for. For Stephen, time slowed down. He turned the ball over. He would not get down on his teammates if they didn't catch it. He dribbled it off his foot. He would not get down on himself. A foul is called. He would not complain to the ref. Taken out of the game, he would look in the coach's eyes for instruction. Sitting on the bench, he'd cheer his teammates on. Missing a shot, it didn't affect his next shot. So he could transcend time as both someone who lived in the present, but someone who was one step ahead in the future.
And he had that maturity in high school?
I saw it in an AAU event in Las Vegas the summer before his senior year of high school. And that was the conviction for us when we saw him. He was awful in this particular game. He was just absolutely awful. But somehow he lived like the perfect player from the standpoint of, he makes mistakes, but one mistake he never makes is being fully engaged in the moment. Ironically, his first game in a Davidson uniform against Eastern Michigan in the University of Michigan tournament up in Ann Arbor, we were down 18 points to Eastern Michigan. He's in the starting lineup. And at halftime, we're down his 18 points, and he had 9 turnovers in the first half. And he wasn't even playing point guard position. And most of the turnovers he had were pick sixes that led to immediate scores. And the coaching staff met prior to going into the locker room at halftime for instructions, and we debated, should we keep him in the lineup? He's killing us. Should we keep him there? And we all came to the consensus that, we saw the same thing happen in Las Vegas. He's going to live in the moment. That's why he's in the starting lineup, because he lives in the moment. He'll come back. The cream will come to the top. Sure enough, it happened. We stayed with him in the starting lineup. We win the game by 3, overcame an 18-point deficit, and he finished with a double-double, 15 points, 13 turnovers. So not your proverbial double-double, but next night against Michigan in the championship game, he had 32 points. And it became a defining moment for him in terms of confidence. And this goes back to that word trust, and it goes back to that word commitment, and it goes back to that word care. And I think that was very evident in the way we coached Stephen, and he certainly mirrored that in everything that he did.
Yeah, I like the old John Wooden quote. I'm going to treat everybody fair, but I'm not going to treat everybody the same. And maybe Steph is wired where he could have came out the other side no matter who he was surrounded with, but there's plenty of other people that would not. And you all having that trust and that faith and giving him that vote of confidence that, hey, go out and play. We're not going to yank you out of the lineup, or we're not going to come down on you for making mistakes. That again gets back to the trust word. It's easy to say it, but those players, as you know better than anybody, those players see through it real quick if you're not walking that way.
Well, he had terrific teammates also who accentuated that trust, who trusted him, who were remarkable in the way they would pass the ball, clear space, set screens, whatever it might have been. And he earned that trust. After he scored 32 against Michigan the next night, he's now interviewed in the national media for the first time in his life. And here's this 18-year-old kid who just went for 32. You think, I'm this, I'm that. He's pounding his chest. Not Stephen. Stephen's first comments were, I could never have done this unless Jason Richards delivered the ball right to the pocket. I could never have done this unless Thomas Sander set some great screens. I could never have done this unless Max Paulus Goslin played great defense behind me and got rebounds and outletted the ball and kept moving on offense and defense. So he gave credit to his teammates. And again, that was part of the character that was so instrumental in our decision to take him, his success here at Davidson, and now his illustrious success as an icon with Golden State.
Yeah, it's the one thing you probably can't teach as a coach, right? Is the character makeup component, where they have it. You can nurture it, you can massage it a little bit, but it's either in there or it's not.
Well, I think it's nurtured by a parent, and he had the great fortune of Dale and Sonia, a great dad and mom who nurtured him, who cultivated those traits within him, and made it a foundation of who he was.
So one thing I love watching him play, right? But one thing I love watching about him specifically is his pregame routine. And they love to get that sort of footage of him. It looks like he's goofing around, right? He's shooting the ball from half court. He's shooting it from the corner. He's shooting it with both hands, off both feet, doing these certain shots. And sort of the untrained eye, it's kind of like this guy's just goofing off. He's not taking his craft serious, even if he's hitting every shot. But it's clear to me that's very deliberate on his part. He is practicing those shots because he's one of a few people that could probably actually take and make those shots in an NBA game. And so I've always enjoyed. I saw a clip of him just recently where he found a dead spot in the court just by dribbling, and kind of going through his routine. And 10 other guys had run past that spot 100 times and no one had noticed it. So, did he have a similar routine in college? Was he doing some of these?
No, he didn't have that particular routine pre-game, but he had a certain regimen that he would follow. And one classic thing he would do is he'd walk off the court, either to go to the locker room for the final notes before we took the court eventually for the introductions, or he left the practice court to go to watch film. Whenever he left, he would always take one of those circus shots from almost the ramp that you walk down to get to the locker room,
Yeah.
and obviously not on the court when he took it, but and he had this capacity to practice things that we would think are either lucky shots or lucky passes, uh, but for him they were natural occurrences that would happen during the game. And I referenced two particular moments this year. They're playing against the Celtics back in January, and it's just before halftime, and there's a loose ball. Stephen picks it up, and he's just about ready to cross half court, and he lets go as the buzzer sounds, and he swished it. Now, people could say, "Oh, that was lucky." I've seen him make that shot, and where the habits build abilities, and he had the habit of taking that shot in practice. Then the other night, I forgot who they were playing against, but he drives baseline, left side, gets down to the basket, gets cut off, but throws a left-handed, one-hand pass cross court to Klay Thompson, who's just standing above the wing, and he catches it in stride and buries a three. I've seen Stephen make that pass in practice regimens all the time when he was here at Davidson, and obviously now with Golden State. So what he does seems spectacular and sometimes could be said to be lucky, but it's not. It's the result of practice and the awareness that he has of things that could happen in a game.
How early in his tenure at Davidson there had to have been moments where you're like, no, yes, good shot, right? Like, how quickly did you figure out that this guy had the ability to do things that other people didn't?
I never had that question about his shooting. In fact, I would say when he make one of those spectacular shots, I would yell out, "Don't these defenders know that's Steph Curry?" I mean, I'd yell out on the sideline. But what I did have an issue with, and something that he learned and gotten better at, was his capacity to try to hit a home run with a pass, try to make the spectacular pass. So the way I approached that was I called him Ichiro, the great player who,
Sure.
how did Ichiro make his money? Hitting singles, right? He
Yep,
was a
yep.
magnificent singles hitter. So anytime Stephen threw what we deemed to be a home run pass, we would always yell out, Ichiro, Ichiro. And to this day, if you say to him, Ichiro, he say, "Yeah, Coach McKillop and a home run." So
That's great. It had to be you talked about Dean Smith and players coming back and being around and creating that culture and that environment. Had to be a pretty remarkable feeling for you sitting there when Steph came back and graduated from Davidson, got his degree, retired his number, the whole ceremony. You were front and center, rightly so. I know he holds you in really hard regard. So what was that? What did that feel like for you?
that story is magnificent from so many perspectives, but there's a couple of sidelights to it. When he declared for the draft at the end of his junior year, he promised to me, to his mother, to his father, to the entire Davidson fan base at a banquet that he was going to graduate. So he honored a commitment, perhaps something that is lost in our world today. Again, it goes back to TCC, commitment. There it is, honoring his commitment. A second thing, and not many people know this, but that next year he was supposed to graduate, was his graduation year. He showed up graduation day with his mom and dad, dressed to the nines, to attend the graduation of his teammates and classmates. And not many people know that.
Yeah, that's
you
incredible.
are what you think you are. You become what you think you'll become. So he thought of himself as a graduate right then. And then it took 15 years or so for him to get his degree. But again, he honored that commitment by getting his degree and fulfilling the responsibilities that he had as a student athlete at Davidson College.
Yeah, and he's really embraced it, right? There are plenty of by it I mean his role is sort of really the face of the college in a lot of ways to a lot of people. There's plenty of athletes who he could have very easily transferred, to a bigger, higher profile school, or you see it all the time in like the NFL when they're doing their announcements, pregame announcements, introducing the lineups, and these guys are citing their high school because they had a bad experience or college or whatever it might be. And so Steph's gone the other direction. He's stayed. I didn't know that story about him coming back for graduation. That's awesome, but has really lived that and embraced the college, not just while he was there, but really every day since. He's at least from the outside looking in, seemingly very proud of that affiliation.
His fingerprints are all over our basketball program and the college, and he wants that to be the way. And it wasn't just 1 year or 2 years or 3 years after. It's been a part of his life. He's made certain that people know he went to Davidson College. And I could tell you categorically that, if you ask, where did Kevin Durant go to school? Well, I know, and probably you know, but I would suspect a large portion of our population doesn't know that he attended Texas. And you could look at so many other players in the NBA. You don't know where they went, but you say, where did Stephen go? Everybody knows Davidson. And it's because he's put it front and center, because he continues to live trust, commitment, and care in all the way he lives his life. There's a film coming out at the end of this month called Underrated. It's a documentary. And I guess it follows in the same vein as the one about the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan, The Last Dance. This is a incredibly wholesome view of the way Steph was judged throughout his high school, college, and even beginning of his pro career as underrated, and his ability to transcend that judgment that other people had made about him. And one of the great films I've seen, and what he does for Davidson College in that film, and when it comes out, you'll be a very proud Davidson alum.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. That's awesome. One last question about him. He departs for the NBA and obviously leaves a tremendous legacy at the school. And, you're on the recruiting path. It had to obviously be a help in the recruiting process, but in a way, he was such a unique player for, the skills, the size or lack thereof, and all of these things that you had to have some interesting conversations with recruits about, hey, I want to come to Davidson, be the next Steph Curry, or I want to follow in his footsteps.
It wasn't so many conversations I had. It was the misconceptions of a lot of our parents and a lot of our prospects today. You can't believe how many emails I received and text messages and videos. My son is the next Steph Curry. My player is the next Steph Curry. Let me say this very clearly. There is not going to be a next Steph Curry. There is one Steph Curry, and that's all there will be. This is a guy who was criticized because he was changing the game by making it a game of long three-point spectacular shots. But yet those same critics never looked closely at his 90+ percentage of making foul shots, nor his 75% statistic of making layups, nor the amount of screens he set in a game, nor the amount of miles he covered running to help his team get open and help himself get open. So he was judged just on that three, and he's such a complete player and so far different than just a three-point shooter.
Yeah, the whole change the game thing, and the people that were upset about it. It's like, look, Babe Ruth changed the game too, and they lowered the mound after Bob Gibson had the year he had. So it's like changing the game is not necessarily a bad thing. It may be a little uncomfortable for some people, but
I think the way he did change the game, though, Billy, is that he proved to the world that in the land of giants and world-class athletes from the standpoint of jumping and size and strength, that he could succeed at the highest level and become iconic because he was a teammate, because he was detailed, because he was disciplined, because he made good decisions, and because he worked at it. And that gives hope to, I think, every young kid growing up today and every young girl growing up today that, maybe I can be that successful. And that's the whole thrust of the film, Underrated.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been fun for me just watching him from his college days to now, where, like I said, the skinny baby-faced kid, and still not a physically imposing person. Obviously, he's definitely bulked up. But yeah, to your point, I always tell people when The thing I love about baseball is that, if you're sitting in a hotel lobby and an NFL team's checking in, for the night, it's an NFL team. And if an NBA team checks in, it's an NBA team. You don't necessarily know it's a baseball team. These guys, a lot of them just look like average dudes.
Yep.
And Steph would fall into that category if you saw him in the street, and it wouldn't necessarily stand out, but just that's a different kind of athleticism for me. It's a more unique kind of athleticism. It's not just big, fast, strong. It's coordination, body awareness, self-awareness, intelligence, things of that nature that he has in spades, obviously.
Yeah. His eye-hand coordination is extraordinary. The movement of his hips because of the strength of his core, equally extraordinary. And as I said earlier, he sees not just where the ball is, but sees where the ball is going to be. And then it translates because he's got these fast twitch eye muscles. I'm serious. He sees things that are remarkable. So he's got the eyes that translates it to the hips, that translate it to the feet. He was a sensational baseball player. As a 10-year-old, yeah. As a 10-year-old, he and this is where I met him. He's playing baseball with our youngest son, Brendan, for a team called the Charlotte Heat. They won the state championship. So weekend after weekend in that particular springtime, we would go to Burlington or to Raleigh or to Greensboro or to Winston or Wilmington and watch them play baseball. And I marveled at the way he was so graceful on the field. And I'm a very avid Yankee fan, and I thought he was so reminiscent of Derek Jeter with the grace that Derek had as a shortstop and as a player and as a person.
Yeah, I can kind of nerd out on the human performance side, and I actually enjoy. Look, the Bo Jacksons of the world are a hell of a lot of fun to watch, right? It's just an absolute show every time they step out there. But the Steph Currys of the world, where it's not as obvious, and if you can really appreciate all those things you touched on, from his hips to his eyes to his core, all that stuff, and how that translates to athleticism and performance, that's kind of sort of that's beyond 101. That's like 201 athleticism as far as teaching college courses. So
you should see him on a dance floor.
I'm sure you have. So, Coach, what are you most excited about over the next couple of years for you in this role? Obviously, you're sort of woven through the fabric there at Davidson College, and I'm just curious what you're most excited about.
Yeah, we live in a world of opinions, almost to the point of being suffocated by opinions, and everyone talks about their rights and their feelings and express their opinions. So we just go through this Final Four for the women as well as for the men, and the chatter that was generated as a result of certain parts of the women's Final Four leads itself into opinions, which leads itself into arguments, which leads itself into entrenching our world in two sides. And what excites me is that I think it's a simple solution. We've got to stop talking all about the disease of me, what I want and what's for me, and talk more about respect. And I hope I can use this platform I have to talk about respect, because I believe that is one of the elements of our existence as humans that has really lost its value in our world. Everyone thinks because there's social media, they can give their opinion no matter who they insult in the process, no matter who they antagonize in the process. So I think we have an opportunity to use our platforms to engage that process.
Yeah, well, that gives me a tremendous amount of satisfaction and calm, knowing that I agree with everything you just said. Not just that you're going to be able to impart that wisdom and influence that at my alma mater, but just young people in general. I completely agree. And there a lot of the things that we overcomplicate by arguing with each other and shouting and digging our heels in can be solved with some pretty simple conversations founded around some of those values we've talked about, like respect. So I'm grateful that you're going to be sort of championing that, not just at Davidson, but everywhere you sort of travel on this new adventure.
Thank you, Billy.
Coach, well, thank you for the time again, and look forward to talking to you.
Okay, again. Billy, wonderful to be with you. Thanks for what you do.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe to be notified of future episodes. If you'd like to support the show, please take a second, leave a rating and review, or share it with your friends. If you're interested in similar content, you can check out my website at nooneiswatching.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter, read my blog, or follow me on your social media platform of choice. Look, your time is valuable, so thank you for lending me some of it. We'll see you next time.